Have you ever felt like you're alive, but someone else is pulling the strings? Someone says something, you get angry. They criticize, you push yourself to prove them wrong. Every event drags you along like a puppet, out of control, losing your composure, losing yourself. You're not free. Even though your hands aren't tied, even though you're not locked up, you're a slave. A slave to your emotions, to your desires, to the weak ego inside you. I've been there, and I know that helpless feeling hurts more than any failure. But I also got out of it, not by trying to be strong in the forced, tough-it-out kind of way, but by living according to Stoicism, step by step, through small, deliberate actions, to master myself, and from that, find real freedom. In this video, I'll share that entire journey, the 7 steps I followed, and that you can start applying today. If you're looking to take back control over your life, keep watching. What you're about to hear next could change the way you see your entire life. Hit subscribe, like, and stay with me, because the final minutes will be the most important. There are moments when silence is the only thing that keeps you from losing yourself. I've been in rooms where words only made things worse. Fights with loved ones, workplace situations where any sentence spoken could be twisted, distorted, weaponized. Or worse, pointless arguments where everyone's just yelling louder to prove they're right while no one's actually listening. And I realized, speaking up isn't always strength. Sometimes stopping, staying silent, that's the real power. Stoicism calls it mastery over speech. And when you master your words, you're mastering your emotions, your reactions, and even your fate. I'm not talking about the kind of silence that comes from fear or passive submission. I'm talking about intentional silence, where you clearly choose not to let others drag you into meaningless battles. Seneca emphasized, it's not that I'm foolish for staying silent, it's that I know speaking now is pointless, even dangerous. There are moments when, if you speak, you lose control. You're being led by reaction, and that means handing someone else the power to control your emotional state. I once saw a close friend lose his job because he couldn't keep his mouth shut during a meeting. His boss unfairly criticized him, clearly unjust. He had every right to defend himself, but he lashed out with biting, uncontrolled words. The result? He lost the career he'd built over more than a decade. If he had chosen silence in that moment, not as surrender, but as a strategic pause to respond later with clarity, he might still have that job. He might have kept his dignity. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you're choosing the right time and place to speak. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, you don't need to talk about virtue, just live virtuously. And if someone can't see that, it's their problem, not yours. This is the most powerful counterattack. When you don't have to clap back, don't have to explain, and yet you maintain inner peace, something no one can touch unless you allow it. Epictetus went even further. He said, if someone insults you, stay silent. Not because you're a coward, but because you understand. Those words don't define you. They reflect the mind of the speaker, not the truth about you. And you don't waste time proving anything to people who aren't even clear-headed enough to understand. I once made the mistake of trying to explain myself in a relationship that was already rotten. I thought if I just laid everything out, if I poured my heart out, they'd understand. But the truth is, people don't understand because they don't want to. Every word I said only made me lose more value in their eyes. It was only when I stayed silent, stepped away, and exited their life that they started to realize what I meant. But by then, I no longer needed it. Silence, in Stoic philosophy, is the highest act of self-mastery. When you don't react on instinct, you give yourself the chance to respond with reason. You stop being a victim of circumstance. You become the one steering the situation. And at the highest level, you don't need to win in others' eyes. You just need not to lose yourself. I know, staying silent when you're insulted, misunderstood, oppressed, it's not easy. It goes against the instinct to fight back, to prove yourself, to demand fairness. But remember, the price of one reckless word in a moment of rage can be your whole future. And the reward of silence at the right moment is respect, strength, and credibility. Things you only earn when you're disciplined enough not to be led by impulse. And I also know some pain can't be spoken. Some things only silence can express fully. A man who's been through enough knows sometimes you don't need to scream to prove you're hurting. You just sit there, breathe deep, and keep moving forward. That's what real strength looks like. So if today you're being misunderstood, attacked, and you feel like your heart's about to explode, here's what I want to say. Try silence, not to suffer, but to reclaim your authority. Because only in silence can you truly hear yourself. There's a kind of pain not everyone can see. Because it's not on your face, it doesn't bleed. It's buried deep inside. That pain is failure. I've seen men break after a career collapse, a divorce, or even just fallen short of something they'd staked all their faith on. But it wasn't the failure that destroyed them. It was how they made that failure their identity, how they went around telling everyone about it, clinging to it as a reason to avoid change. They tell their friends, they post it online, they talk about it over drinks, about who or what made them fall. They think they're sharing. But what they're really doing is locking themselves into the role of a victim. Stoicism doesn't teach you to deny pain. It teaches you to face it, acknowledge it, and rise above it in silence. Epictetus said it clearly, no one escapes failure. What matters is how you choose to respond. Complaining is pointless. Blaming is a waste. Maturity is when you can shoulder that failure alone and still live like a man with dignity. I once suffered a major failure in a business deal, lost nearly all the savings I had built over 10 years, lost confidence in myself. In those days, all I wanted was to scream, to tell someone so I could unload the guilt, so someone would say it's okay. But I stopped. I remembered Marcus Aurelius' words, look at pain as a trainer, not as an enemy. And I asked myself, if I talk about it, what do I really gain? A few nods of pity? Some hollow comfort? Or worse, a skeptical look from people who once saw me as their rock? No, I chose to keep it to myself. Not to hide it, but to deal with it. I journaled, I dissected every decision I made. I reviewed every step, every mistake. I blamed no one. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I turned it into a lesson, then folded it away, stored it in the disciplined part of my mind. And I moved on. Quietly. Keeping failure to yourself isn't about being fake. It's about not wasting your energy trying to explain or justify. It's about keeping your mental space clean, focused on fixing, not whining. The Stoic understands this well. When you reveal your failure too soon, you weaken your own resolve. You become vulnerable to pity, to useless advice, and worst of all, to misguided empathy that makes you think, maybe I don't need to keep trying. Seneca once wrote, failure isn't frightening. Letting it define who you are, that's what's frightening. When you turn failure into a story you keep retelling, you're no longer writing your life forward. You're stuck repeating a chapter like a record on loop. I'm not saying you should live like a soulless machine. If needed, have one true friend, someone who won't judge you or baby you, but will ask you one thing. So what are you going to do next? But don't turn failure into a way to get attention. Don't post long status updates. Don't message a dozen people just to vent, because at that point, you're not healing. You're just looking for an audience for your pain. The strongest recoveries always happen in silence. Like a seed breaking through soil, no one needs to see it. Like a body healing after injury, quiet, in the dark, without spotlight. You're no different. You don't need anyone to validate your strength. Be your own witness. One day, you'll stand in front of others, calm, composed, and no one will know you once hit rock bottom, but you'll know. And that's the only thing that matters. Keep your failure to yourself, not to hide it, but to protect it from the kind of attention that distorts its meaning. Let it grow inside you quietly, and when you're ready, it will become the kind of strength that nothing can ever take from you. Once you've learned how to be silent at the right moment, once you've learned to keep your wounds private so you can heal on your own, the next step, when you can't skip, is to learn how to speak with discipline. Mastering your speech isn't just about avoiding trouble. It's about ensuring that every word you say carries weight and reflects self-respect. I used to talk a lot. I spoke fast. I spoke impulsively. I spoke to impress. I spoke to win the argument. and I paid the price. Strained relationships, people losing trust in me, and nights spent lying awake regretting the careless things I'd said. There's a quote from Epictetus I'll never forget. "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen more and speak less." Sounds simple, but living by it takes discipline, no different than lifting weights, running, or sticking to a diet. The Stoic understands speech is not entertainment. It's a tool meant to serve your purpose, living rightly, living ethically, and staying in control. Every time you speak without thinking, you're exposing a part of your mind. And if you can't control that, others will see your weaknesses more clearly than any weapon ever could. I've sat in meetings where people talked endlessly just to fill the air, but the one person who earned real respect was the one who spoke the least. And yet, every word they said made the whole room stop and think. That's when I learned. Words shouldn't be spent carelessly. They should be used like cash. The more you save, the more valuable they become. Seneca once wrote, "The wise man speaks when necessary, says enough, and tells the truth, but never says everything." That changed the way I looked at communication. I realized that speaking less doesn't just save your energy, it makes your presence stronger. When your words are direct, lean, and to the point, they cut like a blade, and people start listening with more intention. But mastering speech isn't just about talking less. It's also about knowing when not to speak at all. Sometimes you know the truth, but if you say it when others aren't ready to hear it, all you do is provoke resistance. The Stoic knows that truth must be delivered at the right time, in the right way, to the right person. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Not everything we know needs to be said, and when we speak, we must do so with kindness." I once watched a father deeply wound his son, not because he spoke the truth, but because he delivered it like a judgment, not a lesson. What he threw wasn't truth, it was a weapon. And truth, spoken in the wrong way, is still a form of violence. If you can't control your tone, your emotion, and your intent, then silence is the safer choice. A Stoic doesn't avoid communication. They speak, but they speak with purpose. They speak to build, to inspire, to guide, or to assert their position with calm authority, never to satisfy their ego or dominate others. And when they don't have a clear purpose, they keep their words to themselves. Also remember, your words can turn against you in a moment of anger. One reckless sentence can ruin a reputation you've spent years building. One complaint blurted out in exhaustion can cause someone to lose faith in you. That's why the Stoic trains every day, like Marcus did, journaling to review himself, reflecting before speaking, meditating to clear his mind before making decisions. At a deeper level, mastering your speech is mastering your nature, because ultimately, your words reflect who you are. The more disciplined you are with your speech, the more you prove that you've mastered yourself. And that kind of presence needs no shouting or performance. It commands respect on its own. What I've learned is this: when you say something, make sure it's something you won't regret hearing again later. Let your words be able to stand in the full light of scrutiny. And if you're not ready to say something right, clean, and necessary, then it's better to say nothing at all, because you can lose your entire reputation over a single sentence. But you'll never lose anything by choosing silence at the right time, and speaking only when it truly matters. This isn't just a video. This is the reminder you needed today. Hit subscribe and like if you want someone in your corner pushing you to live by your real values. Once you've learned to be silent, learn to give yourself enough quiet to heal from failure, and learn to control every word so you don't betray yourself. Then comes the moment when life throws you a challenge so brutal. No matter how prepared you thought you were, it still feels like a punch in the face. And when that happens, you've got two choices. Either get up or sit there whining about how unfair life is. But Stoicism doesn't grant you that second option. It looks you dead in the eye and asks, so what now? Gonna whine, or are you ready to face it? I remember a time vividly, when work was falling apart, friends stopped calling, income was near zero. Every morning I had to drag myself out of a feeling of uselessness, push back the shame when I saw the worried look in my family's eyes. You know what exhausted me the most? Not the debt, not the hunger, but the urge to just say out loud, "I'm so tired." And yet I held back, not out of pride, but because I knew complaining wouldn't fix a damn thing. It would only make me weaker. Epictetus once said, "You can't control what comes your way, but you can always control how you face it." That's the core of Stoicism. No complaining, no blaming, no excuses, just facing it. The problem is, complaining gives you a temporary sense of relief. It's like scratching an itch. But once the scratch fades, the pain's still there. And then the cycle begins. Hit a wall, complain, go numb, blame the world. A dead-end loop that drags you from being the main character to a helpless victim in your own life. Marcus Aurelius, a warrior emperor who wrote his reflections while grieving a dead child, a dead wife, dead friends, still managed to say, "Stop acting like you'll live forever. Death is getting closer every second. Are you really going to let these petty trials compromise your dignity?" That quote, I copied it and taped it to my desk because I needed the reminder. Challenges don't break you, your negative reaction does. And the first step in that reaction? Complaining. I started changing my mindset. Every time something went wrong, instead of sighing or venting, I asked myself, what haven't I tried yet? Or, what's one thing I can do right now that's still in my control? And then I acted. Just one small thing. Made a call, adjusted a proposal, sent an email, or simply went for a walk to reset my head. It didn't have to be heroic. It just had to be movement. Any movement that wasn't sitting still and whining. I also started watching other people, and I saw two types very clearly. One group, every time something goes wrong, they need to talk, dump it on someone, make sure they're heard. The other group, silent. They work, they stumble, they fix it, they keep working. No whining. And you already know which group succeeds. That much is obvious, but let me be clear. Embracing challenge doesn't mean you have to grit your teeth and suffer in silence like some emotionless machine. It's not about swallowing pain just to get through it. No. Acceptance here means ownership. It means facing the reality in front of you, without denial, without flinching, and then doing something about it. Stoicism calls that amor fati, the love of fate. Love not because it's comfortable, but because it's yours. No more complaints, no more blame. This is your fight. You didn't choose the battlefield, but you can choose how you show up. And when you do that, when you stop whining and start acting quietly, bit by bit, you'll notice something real. You're stronger than you thought. The pain isn't as big as it looked. The challenge isn't as unfair as it felt. And your biggest enemy? It's never the situation. It's always the voice in your head trying to get you to complain and quit. Stay quiet, don't complain, don't make excuses, don't stall, just move, just act, just grow. Because the truth is, if you're still breathing, you're still in the fight. And if you're still in the fight, don't waste time complaining. Get up and get to work. Once you've learned to stop complaining, to quit whining every time adversity hits, you'll face a bigger test. How to stay calm when everything around you feels like it's collapsing. And believe me, that moment will come, sooner or later. A phone call in the middle of the night, an email that pulls the rug out from under your career, an insult from the very person you trusted most, a decision that blindsides you, a betrayal, a sudden accident. It all hits without warning, without mercy. And in that moment, you've got only seconds to choose how to respond. Will you respond or will you just react? If you've been living emotionally unchecked, you'll react. That means pure reflex. You get angry, you yell, you feel insulted, you lash out, you're hurt, you blame, you're triggered, you lose control. And just like that, you become a victim of everything around you because you failed to hold on to one essential thing: composure. But if you live like a Stoic, you respond. And a response, unlike a reaction, is deliberate. It's chosen. Epictetus called it the golden gap between stimulus and response. The moment where you pause, notice the emotion rising, and ask, does this really deserve control over me? I once lost it during a meeting. One small jab, a personal dig from a coworker, and I snapped. Said things I shouldn't have. Showed a complete lack of control. The consequences lasted for a year. Lost credibility, lost opportunities, lost respect from people who once believed in me. All because I couldn't stay calm when it mattered most. After that, I started training. I reviewed my past reactions. I journaled every night to hold a mirror up to myself. Most importantly, I learned to sit still. Not the kind of meditation where you float into bliss. Just sitting still to watch your emotions rise and pass without getting swept away. Like standing on the riverbank, watching the current flow. You don't jump in, you just observe. A Stoic understands this. Emotions aren't the enemy, but being led by them, that's disaster. Anger isn't wrong, anxiety isn't wrong, fear isn't wrong, but when you let them drive your actions, you've handed the wheel to a drunk driver. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the middle of war, illness, and the deaths of those closest to him, still managed to say, "Nothing is new, nothing is terrible. Only the way you see things makes them painful or ordinary." That line became my compass when my mind was ready to explode. Staying calm doesn't mean being numb. On the contrary, it means fully recognizing your emotions, but not letting them call the shots. You can feel anger, but not curse. You can feel anxiety, but not panic. You can feel pain, but not project it onto others. Because when you stay calm, you keep your choices. You stop being reactive. You start responding in ways that align with your long-term goals, not just your short-term impulses. I once heard a powerful line: never make decisions when you're angry. Never promise anything when you're happy. And never react before you understand. If you can live by those 3 rules, you'll be a different breed entirely, in a world where most people are impulsive, reckless, and loud. And here's what I've learned. Calmness has presence. The calm person doesn't need to talk much. People still listen. They don't need to act tough. People still respect them. They don't need to shout, "I'm in control," because they are in control. In a chaotic world where noise and knee-jerk reactions rule, the person who can sit still, think clearly, and speak with weight holds the long-term advantage. And you can be that person. It doesn't take any special talent, just the habit of pausing for 1 second before you respond. Just the discipline to watch your emotions like passing clouds and let them drift by. Just the willingness to ask yourself in every moment, will this reaction move me forward, or is it just making me weaker? Staying calm isn't about pleasing others. It's about protecting your own dignity. Once you've learned to stay calm in chaos, there's a deeper kind of strength, one that most people never realize exists. The power of keeping things private, keeping your thoughts to yourself, keeping your plans quiet, holding close the things that matter most. Because the Stoic understands, what's truly important is exactly what you shouldn't put on display. I used to be the kind of person who overshared, said whatever I was thinking, told everyone everything I was doing. I thought that was honesty. I believed that sharing everything would make people trust me, understand me. But the more I talked, the weaker I felt. Plans unraveled before they started. Private matters became gossip. My emotions turned into weapons others could use to manipulate me. And I realized I had handed over control of myself simply because I didn't know how to keep my mouth shut. Stoicism doesn't talk about secrecy in the conspiratorial sense. It talks about discretion as a sign of inner strength. Epictetus once taught, keep your mind like a fortress, only open the gates when necessary. That means you're not at war with the world, but you don't hand it the keys to your inner life. One thing is nearly guaranteed. When you speak too soon, you weaken yourself. Talk about a plan while it's still an idea, and you start imagining you've already achieved it. Talk about your pain too early, and you won't have had time to process it before others react. Reveal your strategy before you're ready, and you become a target before you're strong enough to defend yourself. That's why Seneca wrote, "What is yours? Guard it. Only when it is strong enough should it be brought into the light." I remember once in business, I had a powerful idea. In my excitement, I told a few friends. A week later, someone launched it before I could. They didn't steal it. They were just faster. I didn't blame them. I blamed myself for not keeping it to myself, for trusting the wrong timing. From that point on, I changed. I built the habit of holding something back. No matter how close I was to someone, I never said everything. Not out of mistrust, but out of respect for my own path. Not everything needs to be heard by others. Sometimes the best way to grow something is to keep it private. The Stoic knows, Secrets aren't about hiding, they're about protecting. Protecting from judgmental eyes, from sabotage, intentional or not, and most importantly, from your own ego that craves early validation. Because early validation often kills long-term success. Look at people who truly succeed. They're discreet. They say nothing until the results are undeniable. And when they do speak, people listen. Not because they're flashy, but because every word they say carries weight. Because they've gotten used to filtering, refining, and building quietly before stepping into the light. On the flip side, the ones who talk too much, overshare, and brag are often weak on the inside. They need others' approval to feel okay. That dependency makes them easy to manipulate, easy to attack, easy to throw off course. I fell into that trap once, using openness to mask inner instability. I needed to vent to feel lighter, needed to be heard to feel valuable. But every time I overshared, I felt emptier. Because when you put all of yourself out there, there's nothing left to guard as your core strength. Since embracing Stoicism, I chose to live by a different rule. Stay private enough not to get swept away, open enough not to be isolated. Those who deserve it will get access. Those with depth will understand without needing an explanation. The rest, I keep for myself, not out of coldness, but because I'm nurturing something precious, and I won't let curiosity destroy it. Keeping things to yourself is a form of discipline. It's when you stand before the temptation to speak, to show, to be validated, and say, "Not yet, let it sit." It's when you understand what's built in silence tends to last. It's knowing that speaking out doesn't always lighten your load. Sometimes it exposes you and makes you easier to knock down. Like a mountain, quiet, no shouting, no signs, and yet it stands firm. Everyone who passes must look up. Not because it tells its story, but because it simply exists, solid, complete, discreet. And that's how I want to live. If you followed me this far, from learning how to stay silent, how to keep your failures private, how to speak with discipline, how to embrace challenges without complaining, how to stay calm in the chaos, and how to guard your most vital secrets, then I want you to understand one thing. None of this is meant to make you rigid, cold, or emotionless. It's meant to bring you to one ultimate truth that every seasoned man longs for. Freedom. Not the shallow kind of freedom where you do whatever you want. Not the surface-level freedom of being free from external control. I'm talking about inner freedom. Freedom from the very forces that pull you down every single day. Erratic emotions, fleeting desires, impulsive reactions, the constant need for validation, and the fragile ego that can't handle silence. Stoicism calls this clearly by name: self-mastery. Mastering yourself, that's the first step and the non-negotiable foundation for achieving true freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "He who masters himself is never dragged by what he cannot control. He chooses his responses, he chooses his thoughts, he chooses his values, and he lives them to the end." I don't know if you've ever felt enslaved by your own self. I have. I've let anger control my mouth. I've let fear keep me silent when I should have spoken up. I've let greed push me past my ethical limits. I've let my wounds turn me into someone who retaliates instead of someone who acts with reason. And I know what it feels like. It's being locked inside a cage. Even though no one's tying you down. You still go to work, you still smile, you still talk to people. But deep down, you know, you're not free. You're being manipulated by your own self. I started breaking out of that cage by asking myself one simple question every morning. Today, am I letting anyone or any emotion control me? If the answer was yes, I corrected it. If the answer was not yet, I doubled down on discipline. Day by day, I reclaimed every inch of mental freedom by adjusting my words, limiting my actions, controlling my thoughts, and most of all, not letting things I can't control damage the things I can. Stoicism teaches this. You can't control the world, but you can absolutely control yourself. And once you do that, the world stops being so terrifying. Self-mastery means this. A beautiful woman walks by, and instead of letting lust hijack your brain, you smile and get back to work. It means bad news lands, and instead of slamming the table, you take a breath and revise the plan. It means when people praise you, you don't float. When they criticize you, you don't collapse. You know who you are. And you live by that, no matter what's happening around you. And when you reach that point, nothing can manipulate you anymore. Not women, not money, not flattery, not betrayal, not collapse, because you understand everything outside of you can be taken. But if you hold your center, you can't be taken. That's why Stoics never define freedom as rebellion. They define freedom as discipline. Because without discipline, you'll always be dependent on emotions, on bad habits, on the crowd's approval. And dependence means no freedom. I'm not claiming I've reached some perfect, invincible state. I still stumble, I still make mistakes, but every time I fall, I get back up faster. Every time I mess up, I learn something deeper. And every time I stay in control during a hard moment, I feel a little stronger. Freedom doesn't arrive overnight. It's the result of hundreds of small decisions. Every time you choose mastery over instinct. Every time you choose silence over meaningless talk. Every time you act with reason instead of running to emotion. And one day you'll stand in front of the mirror, look yourself in the eyes, and no longer see someone being pulled around by life. You'll see a free man, one who needs no agreement, no validation, no victory over others. Just victory over himself. That's when you'll know you've lived in the spirit of Stoicism. And that's when you'll know you're truly free. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.